Success? Oh, hi. Glad you're here. I'm glad to be with you. I'm going to talk about 1999, the most impactful films of that year in my life. Um, what a year. Some circles consider 1999 to be the greatest year in cinema history because it gave us so many films that weren't just influential and game changers, but just groundbreaking, memorable, just some of the greatest movies ever made, all in one year. Look it up. Look up all the movies that came out in 1999. It's insane. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm just going to talk about a few, and I'll try to make it as quick as I possibly can. Here we go. First I gotta mention though, because I didn't mention previously, I believe in the last video, I think it came out in 98. Psycho. I mean, I mentioned it, but like for real though, Psycho, the remake with Vince Vaughn, love that movie, amazing movie. I mentioned that in the last video, but I'll mention now that I remember seeing that with my father. I convinced him to go to the theater with me. He's like, oh yeah, I remember the original. And I was like, well, I've never seen the original. And he's like, oh, maybe you should see the original first. And I was like, no, I want to see this one first, and then I'll see the original. I have seen both, and I do still prefer the Vince Vaughn version. Yeah, so what? Sue me. I love that movie so much, and the way he like eats the candy corn. Like, I think Vince Vaughn is a freaking genius, and I think that movie has a purpose. I love that movie. I love its soundtrack. Its soundtrack is amazing. Everything from Rob Zombie to a remake of the Psycho, or not remake, but remix of the Psycho and classic music, but also with dialogue from Vince Vaughn and The Kitchen's Awful Homie. That song, The Kitchen's Awful Homie. Look up the Psycho soundtrack. It's unreal. It's unreal. Oh, and then you got Psycho Killer, a cover of Psycho Killer, the Talking Heads song. Pet Shop Boys is on there. Psycho. Plus, Psycho, the remake, has, near the beginning, the cameo outside the bank window of Gus Van Sant, the director of the remake, getting yelled at by Alfred Hitchcock, director of the original, which was pointed out to me by Vince Vaughn in the commentary. This was a commentary that I watched when I stole that DVD. That's a whole other story how I got away with that. That was a miracle how I got away with stealing those DVDs from Media Play after kind of getting caught, but then they didn't catch me red-handed after I shoved them down my pants to the leg and they told me to lift my shirt. That's a whole other thing. Paxil was bad for me. But then I watched it on our computer because at the time our computer was the first DVD player we ever had. And then the commentary told me, and I literally quote a line of a commentary from Vince Vaughn. There's Gus getting yelled at by Hitchcock. One of my favorite cameos of all time, of both Hitchcock and anyone. The director of the remake getting yelled at by the director of the original, so that the director of the original still has his cameo, who cameoed in all of his other original films. So I wanted to mention Psycho. Toys came out in 92, and I don't think I brought it up. Toys, starring Robin Williams and Robin Wright, and Joan Cusack, and Mr. Dumbledore himself, the second Dumbledore, not the first one. Toys is an amazing film that my mother rented for me one day when I was sick home from school, and I was like, what the heck is this? And then the movie started, and I was like, what the heck is this? And then now it's a classic. It's one of the smartest, greatest films, one of the greatest comedies ever made, if you ask me, and one of the smartest comedies I just discovered after just watching it with my son not but an hour or two ago, who's 10. I was 9 when it came out. You hit full circle, but even he understood. And that movie came out in 92, and they predicted VR headsets being in many homes. It also predicted using small drones as warfare in that movie. That movie is way ahead of its time. Unfortunately, it's not available on any streaming service. But if you can ever get your hands on seeing the movie Toys, starring Robin Williams, man, I quote that thing like crazy. I hate it when my food touches. I think I'd like a sandwich now. I just ate a sandwich. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that movie. Anyway, let's get actually to 1999. We'll mention, let's see, here in February. I got notes. So what? here in February. Well, no, that's not February. That's December. This is February. 8mm. 8mm starring Nicolas Cage. I don't know how I saw that in theaters. I must have been 15. But I remember seeing it in theaters. And that's how I learned what a snuff film was. Anyway, what do we got? 3, 4? 4. Go. Go. Go! Exclamation point. I mentioned in another video, it might have been about Scream 2 in 97. Timothy Olyphant is amazing, and I mentioned all the amazing things Timothy Olyphant is in, but I didn't mention Go. Go is another one of my favorite Timothy Olyphant performances. Go? What a movie. I'd never, like, Pulp Fiction was one thing, but Go took the Pulp Fiction structure of breaking up the time periods of storytelling and mixing it up even further. It did better than Pulp Fiction, I think, because Go tells separate stories that intertwine and interlock the same, but it's because they're telling each character's story one by one and using it more in a more useful way. Go is a fantastic film, absolutely quotable and so much fun and star-studded Go watch Go, dude. The dude. Would you say you're open to new things? That's how I was introduced to him, and now he's this great character actor who, even with a teeny tiny little one scene in The Dark Knight, can make a big impression. Whoever you're working for, they're dead. Like that guy. I love that guy. But he's amazing in Go. You know, I watch all those cop shows and they never get it right. Never. Ever. They never do it right. Ever. Go is a great movie. Another movie starring Scott, well, not another movie starring, but a movie starring Scott Wolf, another cast member of Party of Five, which I mentioned in the last video, 1998, all these Party of Five cast members. Every single cast member from Party of Five went on to do bigger and better things. That's a classic show. I should rewatch that. I haven't seen it since I was a kid. All I remember is I didn't want to take out the trash until the commercial break, because Party of Five was one of my first weekly scheduled viewing shows, up there with like X-Files and X-Men. And anyway, Party of Five was a good show. Moving on. Go starring Sarah Polley, who just won an Oscar for writing. And also starred in my favorite zombie film, directed by Zack Snyder. We'll talk about impact. SLC Punk. I'm just going to mention SLC Punk because it was a movie starring Matthew Lillard, who I met, great guy, who also was in Scream, big impact, and my future wife, best friend at the time, current ex-wife, still best friend, introduced me to, and she was obsessed with. She's like, oh, this movie. And then later in life, I discovered Annabeth Gish, who's in SLC Punk. I love Annabeth Gish. She's amazing. Who then ended up in X-Files. With Robert Patrick, not Pattinson, excuse me, the other one. Robert Patrick, T-1000, who I met. You can't make this stuff up. Which, by the way, considering when I'm filming this, I met Ahmed Best. My son and I met Ahmed Best a few months ago, which must have been literally after he filmed the thing that was released yesterday. If you know, you know. I met him. And we actually watched that Temple Challenge show, every episode. Boy, did we get rewarded for that. That's off topic. 2 movies came out on the same day in July. One of them was Lake Placid. I'm just going to mention Lake Placid because I have a vivid memory of seeing Lake Placid in theaters. It was a good time. Bill Pullman, Bridget Fonda, Oliver Platt. I had fun watching Lake Placid. The other one I'll mention is Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut. What I think is Nicole Kidman's best film. What I think is Tom Cruise's best film. What I think is Stanley Kubrick's best film. Eyes Wide Shut, in my opinion, is one of the greatest films ever made and is really underrated because most people just correlate it with some kind of cult orgy scene. But there's so much important representation about that scene and so much more going on with that movie that goes over most people's heads of what it's really about and how it's about the obsession of your imagination, how your imagination can get away with something that could have happened, or something that might happen, or something that is happening in your own mind, which then tears a relationship apart, especially if there's lack of communication. Like, you imagining your significant other with someone else can destroy a relationship, even if it never even happened. Temptation. Eyes Wide Shut is so underrated and brilliant, and I could do 100 book reports on what's really going on in that movie. That movie is a masterpiece. And I got to see it because my best friend at the time convinced his mother to take us. Blew our freaking minds, because I was what? 15? Let's do it in December? 16? 16 years old. I remember vividly when the movie was over, his mother had only one thing to say. All those women's breasts were fake. Even at 16, I knew not only was she full of it, but she was just jealous. But Eyes Wide Shut is a freaking masterpiece. What do we got? 9, 10, 12? Double Jeopardy. It's got Ashley Judd. It was probably my introduction to Ashley Judd. I just remember watching it in a friend's basement once. Memory of watching Double Jeopardy and learning about that law. Good movie. Fight Club. Fight Club, I believe, is one of the greatest films ever made, and David Fincher's best film. You can break apart every single scene in that film and its brilliance of filmmaking. Fight Club is a masterclass in storytelling and filmmaking, and both of them separately at their best. Intertwined. Brad Pitt at his best. Edward Norton at his best. Helena Bonham Carter at her best. Meatloaf at his best. Even Jared Leto with his blonde tips. Bleach blonde hair. Fight Club. Masterpiece. Flashback humor. I don't need to talk about... Everyone knows about Fight Club. Fight Club. Had a big impact on me. We serve your food. We pump your gas. Do not F with us. Oh, and the thing, someone who's been in jail and has been a fugitive at times, it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me because it makes me cherish every moment, every meal, every breath of fresh air, being able to go walk outside right now, being able to make stupid YouTube videos that no one cares about. That's called freedom. And every single person who's never been to jail does not appreciate that whatsoever. Because it's just, whatever. No. You need to appreciate being alive. Because you could die at any given moment. So I'm able to do that because of certain experiences in my past. And that's one of the most impactful scenes of Fight Club, is when he robs the convenience guy, takes his ID, says, oh, you wanted to be a vet? The guy thinks he's about to die. Brad Pitt lets him go. And Edward Norton was like, what the heck was that all about? The next thing he eats will be the greatest meal he's ever had. He will wake up in the morning glad to be alive. He will never again take freedom for granted. Being alive, which no one should. You have no right to be here. And if you're still alive, you are very, very lucky. And you need to appreciate that every single day. Especially you spoiled Americans. Fight Club, good movie. What else shall we mention? Bringing Out the Dead. Bringing Out the Dead is a classic Oliver Stone film starring, once again, Nicolas Cage. I just have such vivid memories of that movie. My brother's girlfriend at the time, I always wanted a big sister, and she kind of was for me, took me to see that movie. It was a good time. We were a little late, but I had fun. And that movie was a big impact on me. It's a great movie. I think it's like one Graveyard Shift. That's an insane movie. I need to see that again. That's an insane movie. And then I remember when I lived with my brother, or he lived with me, that was one of the VHS tapes. And I'm like, I'm going to watch that again. And even the second viewing, I was like, man, this movie is insane. I have so much respect for paramedics. And when I think of a paramedic, I think of the film Bringing Out the Dead. If I was a paramedic, that would be my mantra. Just like for servers, it's waiting. For paramedics, it should be Bringing Out the Dead, because the thing a paramedic has to go through on a regular basis. One of my employees recently expressed to me that they used to be an EMT, and I was like, that must have been rough, because I brought up Bringing Out the Dead, and they were like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for very long. I couldn't take it anymore, because the things we had to deal with on a nightly basis, the things I had to see, the emotionally damaging and scarring things for your job. Paramedics and firemen are heroes. Say what you want about the military and the police. Great. Good for them. But paramedics and firemen, especially paramedics, those are the real heroes. Those are heroes. Those are heroes. Firemen and paramedics. Thank them for their service. Say a prayer every time you see an ambulance going down the street. Not just for the person they're carrying or picking up, but for the freaking drivers and those in the back saving lives, sacrificing their own mentality. Whew, I'm getting all worked up. Excuse me, but I'm trying to go through this quickly. Man on the Moon. Man on the Moon is a film starring Andy Kaufman, played by Jim Carrey, where Andy Kaufman possessed Jim Carrey's body and starred in his own film about his life. Yeah, that's a true story. You should watch Jim and Andy on Netflix, the documentary about the making of Man on the Moon, after watching Man on the Moon, of course. If you don't know what Man on the Moon is, I'm sorry. You need to watch it immediately, and then you need to watch Jim and Andy. If you like Jim Carrey, do it right now. If you've never heard of Andy Kaufman, do it right now. Two of the greatest comedic minds of all time. If you wonder what happened to Jim Carrey, how come he doesn't act as much, and how come sometimes he's being all weird, Jim and Andy has all the answers for you. I remember seeing Man on the Moon with my father after growing up, watching my father watch many documentaries about Andy Kaufman. That's how I learned about Andy Kaufman, was the documentaries. I believe that song is at the beginning of the movie, but it's because it was also a prominent song in the documentary. Andy Kaufman was probably the greatest comedic genius who's ever walked the face of the earth. True story. Period. The end. And we saw that movie in theaters, my dad and I together, which is kind of crazy considering that would have literally been a couple of weeks before the biggest fallout I had with my father. Yelling such horrible things at him and threatening his life. That's another story. Did I discuss that story in one of my other videos? Probably. The Troubled Teens, where I got arrested New Year's 2000. The story's in that video. But Man on the Moon, oh man, the way that movie opens and just weeds out all the people who won't get it. I love that movie so much. It's a great movie. But it really, goes hand in hand with also Jim and Andy, the making of that movie, where Jim Carrey was literally possessed by Andy Kaufman. That's the only explanation. Classic film, one of my favorite comedies of all time. And its soundtrack, I want to have a couple of those songs, like the one, spoiler alert, at his funeral, sung at my funeral, or played at my funeral, whatever. Speaking of soundtracks, I forgot to mention Toys from '92, the Robin Williams film. Great soundtrack. Tori Amos, Happy Workers, look up that song. Great. Oh, and who had their hand in some of the music in Toys? Hans Zimmer. Hans freaking Zimmer. He does the music for this movie, too. Won an Oscar. He's going to win another one next year after Part 2 comes out in exactly 225 days. Right, Man on the Moon. Great movie. Starring Andy Kaufman. Not Jim Carrey, but Andy Kaufman just using Jim Carrey's body. Galaxy Quest came out on Christmas. I don't think I saw it right away, but Galaxy Quest is one of my favorite comedies. It was way ahead of its time as far as talking about nerd culture, talking about the effects of Comic Cons, talking about the effects of fandom, big time, being a huge part of that movie. Actors who may only be known for one role, and then they're spending the rest of their lives at cons making money, but they're loved by so many fans, and it's such devotion, and it's a brilliant comedy with a brilliant concept of actors who think it's fake, but it's really real, after being taken by aliens who think they're real, but they're really fake, and then they find out it's fake, but then they're convinced that it's still real, and then the fake becomes real, and the fake returns, and the real is still fake, but the fake is still real. Galaxy Quest is a great movie. My introduction to Justin Long, Sam freaking Rockwell, Sigourney Weaver. Let's get out of here before one of them kills Guy. Is there air? You don't know. Oh, and Monk himself? What's his name? That guy, Monk. You know who I'm talking about. He's great. What a great cast. Oh, even the alien guys. You must save us. Like, the entire cast is filled with people that were hardly recognizable at the time, but now are mostly household names. Like Tony Shalhoub. Aha. Everybody in that movie is absolutely phenomenal, and it's a phenomenal movie, brilliantly written, filled with amazing jokes. The late great Alan Rickman, long before he was known as Snape. You know, sure, he's got Die Hard, but to me, he'll always be dude from Galaxy Quest, and then Snape. Like Galaxy Quest #1 for Alan Rickman. Great performance by him. That movie is so brilliant. Talk about smart comedy with heart and emotion, with ridiculous joke. Like, if you haven't seen Galaxy Quest, it's not just a Star Trek parody. No, they're just using things like that as a jumping off point. And now we go to Comic Cons and meet these celebrities. I know I have. Wait for the celebrity video. I met Jar Jar Binks, aka Jedi Master, Youngling Trainer. That'll become a household name soon enough. Speaking of Star Wars, this should be #1, but it's not. The reason it's not, we'll go over when we get to #1, but it'll be the penultimate right now. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, came out in 1999 on May 19th. Probably the most impactful, film I've ever seen in my life. It's not #1 because of the cutesy story I have for #1. But Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, long before the days of the internet, although this was the early days of the internet, and I remember looking up the story script and story structure of the film online, so I knew all the beats. They made their own pictures, but at the time I thought they were actual shots from the film, and I'm like showing my parents, look how cool this looks! But it was just someone's rendering of what was being described, but I literally knew most of the film before it came out. I read the book. No, not Episode 1, that was 2 and 3. Not Episode 1. Episode 1, they did a spoiler special on the Sci-Fi Channel. Okay? Saying, warning, we're going to spoil the movie. We've got leaks about Episode 1, thanks to this new thing called the internet. And we're going to spoil it. And I couldn't help myself. I watched it. But they did a rap song where they dropped all the huge spoilers so that it went over some people's heads. But I misheard one of the lines in the song. And it was Darth Maul rapping about the story of the film. And then, like, his last line of the rap was like, oh, and one more thing. Liam Neeson dies. Or no. Yeah, okay. He's talking about Jar Jar, and then from Jar Jar goes into Liam Neeson dies, and so does Darth Maul. But when I was watching it, which I couldn't rewatch, it wasn't on YouTube, I heard he and Neeson dies, and so does Darth Maul. So I knew Darth Maul was going to die. I knew Qui-Gon was going to die, but they kind of spoiled that in the trailer, because when you have Obi-Wan Kenobi literally in the trailer going, no! Obviously, his only reason for reacting like that would be watching his master die. Duh. Don't spoil things in trailers, especially for us smart people who can put two and two together. It's not a spoiler. Yeah, it is. It's called intelligence. It's called deductive reasoning. But anyway, I thought the line was he and Neeson dies. In retrospect, it was Liam Neeson dies. But I went into the movie thinking they were referring to Jar Jar. So I thought that Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Jar Jar were going to die. So I was on the edge of my seat the entire, end battle. When Jar Jar's going through all that. Whoa! I met him. Nothing wrong with Jar Jar. I thought he was going to die. But he didn't. So that was my surprise, was that Jar Jar lived. I remember being in the theater and someone was there dressed up as Darth Maul. And when Darth Maul bites it, you just hear him in the silent crowd. Aww! Because Darth Maul was a great character. Ray Park. I went to the first Star Wars Celebration in 1999 in Denver, Colorado with my father, where we met some of the actors. That's where I met Warwick Davis. Anthony Daniels was there. Ray Park was there. Anakin was there. I met Captain Panaka himself. Because my dad insisted when he came into the store the same time we were in the store. Like, so many great memories about Star Wars Celebration. That's a whole other story that I could get into, maybe perhaps in the celebrity video. But I gotta say, the days before the internet, and this was like when midnight, I believe Star Wars Episode 1 kind of started the trend of midnight showings, because you couldn't show the movie until its release date. So then the movie theater was like, well, we want to make as much money as possible and have as many showings as possible, so let's start it at midnight. Nowadays, I don't know why or how, I think it's because of movie theater shootings, unfortunately. They push them back earlier. Like tomorrow, John Wick 4 comes out. But you can see it today at 3 o'clock is the first showing, which I have to go to get my coins from AMC, because those coins are really cool, and there's only 100 per building. But so to get tickets for Star Wars before online ticket sales, my brother and I and his girlfriend's little brother literally camped out at a Cinemark Tinseltown parking lot for tickets overnight in a tent. Mark slept, but his girlfriend's little brother and I played one singular game of Uno that lasted the entire night, like literally 12 hours. That's Uno for you. People would go across the street to use the bathroom, which was just them peeing on the wall of the bank. Great memories. Got up in the morning, they opened the box office, we go around the block, purchase our tickets for the midnight showing, which had multiple screens. And I saw Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, in the midnight screening with my parents. My brother had to wait till the next morning. I saw the movie 3 times on opening day, I believe. It wasn't until our second viewing that we realized Sidious is Palpatine, because I thought I was getting how Palpatine became evil and Sidious, but he already was. He already was. He's not even credited in that movie. Darth Sidious's credit is not in the credits because it was a secret. But we figured it out. We were like, oh, that's why he smirks when Padme tells him she's going back to Naboo. Anyway, I love Episode 1. I could go on and on and on and on. Obviously, I'm a Star Wars geek, and Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is one of my favorite Star Wars films, period. It's the one I quote more than any, I think. It's the one I've seen more than any, probably. I love the prequels, every single one of them, especially Episode 1. I don't know where all this stuff came from, where everyone hated it when it came out. Everyone loved it when it came out, and all of a sudden everyone changed their tune one day. Whatever. But now we're finally getting some prequel love in The Mandalorian, that's for darn sure. But I saw Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, its initial release 19 times. That's 19. 19 times. Hey, in 1999. I remember one time at the location where I literally work now, back when they were still using film, they had a burnout, and it burned the film, and in the middle of the movie was right before the pod race. They were like, sorry folks, we'll have to give you credit for a future movie, but this reel just burned up. I remember sneaking in, well, not sneaking in, but watching a few minutes of it whenever I would go to another movie. 19 times. And then when it was re-released in 3D a decade ago, I saw it 3 more times because my brother had seen it 20 times when it first came out. So he beat me. But then I ended up seeing it 3 more times in 3D and took him once. So he's seen it 21 times in theaters. and I've seen it 22 times. I have seen Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, 22 times in theaters. How I afforded 19 times at the age of 16 is beyond me. But I did. I must have been getting so high. I probably did a lot of extra chores just to get some extra allowance. But Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, featuring all three of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time. Number 3, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Number 2, R2-D2. And number 1, Palpatine. So wait till I go on a tangent about how much I love Episode 9. Yeah, I said it. I love all Star Wars because they're all Star Wars. And I would never take any of them seriously. They're for kids, you know. But number 1, speaking of Star Wars, yet again, the most impactful film that came out in 1999, believe it or not, was Inspector Gadget, starring Matthew Broderick. Not only am I a huge Matthew Broderick fan, whether it be Ferris Bueller or The Producers or War Games or my personal favorite Lady Hawk, Matthew Broderick as Inspector Gadget blew my mind. I loved the cartoon as a kid. I wanted to see this movie so bad. But the reason why I'm giving it number 1 is for this little nugget of a story that I'll try to make quick because I'm way out of time. My girlfriend at the time, it was my first love. My first love. Her name is Chelsea. She was the first time I experienced love. And like her dad said, will it last the test of time? Anyway, we practiced our first kiss because I was nervous. I was 15 at the time? No, 16. It was right after I turned 16. And it was going to be our first kiss. And we always referenced Empire Strikes Back. Han and Leia's first kiss. And that whole spiel. You like me because I'm a scoundrel. I happen to like nice men. I'm a nice man. No, you're not. You're... And then they kiss. I got her to memorize that back and forth dialogue and said that should be our first kiss. And we went and saw Inspector Gadget together. My dad gave us a ride. It was a nice little date. He didn't chaperone. He just dropped us off and picked us up. But after the movie, as we were waiting for him to pick us up, and I just enjoyed the quirky, fun, don't take it seriously, goofy Inspector Gadget, starring Matthew Broderick, which I had every single one of the McDonald's toys that all joined together to make a big Inspector Gadget and all do their own things. Great stuff. I was so nervous. Heart was pounding. I was sweating. I couldn't do it. I couldn't kiss her unless I was cued, which is why I had the dialogue. So I started the dialogue. Your hands are dirty. Mine are dirty too. What are you afraid of? Afraid? You're trembling. I'm not trembling. You like me because I'm a scoundrel. I happen to like nice men. I'm a nice man. No, you're not. You're... Boom. Smacked her one on the lips. Right on cue. That was my first kiss with my first love. Was thanks to that scene from Empire Strikes Back. Han and Leia's first kiss. We're not together anymore. She also had a big part of Scream. That's from the Troubled Teens videos, and maybe the Scream 96 and 97 videos. 96 probably. But anyway, you don't want to know that story. I'm not supposed to tell it anymore. But Inspector Gadget was the movie we watched and then kissed. Which is why I bring it up, and it's number 1. Because let's hope that memory never goes away, and if it does, here it is on record. That's how I kissed Chelsea. Thanks to Empire Strikes Back. After Inspector Gadget. 1999. Good year. Turn of the century. Then I had a downfall and went to jail and fought with my dad, and things really went south. But like I said, those are the teenage years videos that you shouldn't watch. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I love it. Saw it 22 times in theaters and probably about 222 times altogether. Okie dokie.